Hello, everybody. Hello, if you've already arrived. Very nice that you've joined us for day one and evening one. My name is Milarepa, and I hope you've had a really good day on retreat. It's been quite a packed day, and well, particularly if you've done everything. I've just bumped into Suryagupta, and she said that she'd been doing restorative yoga with about 100 people. So, you know, it's really, really good if you've been doing the program. And even if you've not been able to do the whole program, I hope you're getting something from the retreat already. I know from the Slack Lounge comments and hearing things from the team that many of you are really appreciating the meditation teaching and input. And tonight we're going to have a really sort of inaugural sort of start to the retreat theme, which is stories from the life of Milarepa. I'll say a little bit more when we sort of start officially, but let's see who we've got. Who have we got? Hippolyte's my crew tonight. Who have we got, Hippolyte?
So we've got 107 people with us already.
107, that's almost auspicious. If we had 108, it would be auspicious.
No, it's 111.
No, it's 111. So well, that's very auspicious then.
We have Vajrashura in Dublin.
Hello, Vajrashura.
Nigel in South London.
Nigel in South London.
With Swati from the LBC.
Swati from the LBC. Not such a glamorous location, but very welcome, Swati.
Nina Ellen from NYC.
Really, that's more glamorous. Hello, Nina.
Sadhaketu in Vajrasana.
Sadhaketu in Vajrasana. That's great. That's great.
Quite a lot of people from Dublin.
Oh, great. Oh, well, the Dubliners. Welcome. Welcome to the Dubliners. That's very good. Very, very good. I hope the groups thing worked today. I wasn't around for the groups. Did it work?
It worked.
That's good. So hopefully you all found, those of you who were around at 11, found yourself in breakout groups and things. And I hope that technically you're finding your way with the Slack Lounge and all the Zoom links, and that everything's going smoothly. I think we've got over any teething troubles now, so hopefully it all goes smooth from now on. Okay, so it's 7 o'clock. So welcome if you've just joined me. My name is Milarepa, and this evening we've got, in a way, the first evening of talking about our theme proper. Our theme is the life and stories from the life of Milarepa. Milarepa was perhaps Tibet's most famous yogi. And by yogi, I don't mean like yoga as in Ashtanga yoga, or some of you have been doing restorative yoga with Suryagupta just now. I mean yogi as in a meditator. Milarepa lived in, I think, the 12th century, maybe 11th and 12th century. And he was a complete renunciate, and we're going to hear more about his life. In fact, we're going to hear his sort of life story up until enlightenment from Suryagupta this evening. Milarepa was famous for being completely uncompromising, and his teachings have come down to us in songs. He used to sing his teachings. Joy was a characteristic of Milarepa, so we've called this retreat the Fire of Joy. It was perhaps the hallmark of his teaching, all the more surprisingly because his life was, from a material sort of ordinary perspective, it was extremely hard. He had no creature comforts whatsoever. Anyway, we'll hear more about Milarepa. But what we'll do tonight is, well, we'll have a whole evening of storytelling, meditation, and ritual. So in a few minutes, I'll hand over to Suryagupta, and it'll be seamless. We'll suddenly be in Suryagupta's house, in her, wherever you are, in your shrine room, Suryagupta. And she'll be introducing us to the life of Milarepa. We'll have, after about half an hour, we'll have some meditation. I'll lead us in meditation. We'll meditate for about 20 minutes, and we'll have a 10-minute break where you can go and make a cup of tea. And then we'll come back and we'll have more of the story of Milarepa from Suryagupta. And then we'll have about 15, 20 minutes of Q&A. So if you've got questions, you can write them in the chat box. So do think about questions as Suryagupta's talking. And then Suryagupta and I both will have a go at responding to your questions. And then we're going to finish the evening with a ritual, with a puja, as it's called. So last night, those of you who were here last night, we did a short ritual to dedicate ourselves to being on retreat. And tonight, it's another shortish ritual, actually probably just the same sort of length, but it's a different ritual. It's called a Threefold Pooja. And tonight's particularly special. We're going to do pujas every night, but tonight I think is particularly special. It's a full moon night. It's a full moon night. And you may think, so what? Well, in the Buddhist tradition, the full moon has always featured in the life of the Buddha, in the life story of the Buddha. He was born under a full moon. He gained enlightenment under a full moon. He taught his disciples for the first time. He turned the wheel of the Dharma under full moon. He gained parinirvana. His body died under a full moon. And all over the Buddhist world, we mark the full moon. At the London Buddhist Centre, if you're here, you'll know that every full moon we do a ritual. We do a full moon ritual. And it's said that the merit of practicing on a full moon is many, many times, let's say millions of times more than if it wasn't a full moon. You might not believe that. I don't know if you take that literally or not. I'm not sure I do. What I do like is that Buddhism sees us as connected to the natural world. And the natural world is, well, I think we often become blind to the beauty and the wonder of it, particularly if we live in the city here in London. It's not always easy to even see the moon, even when it's clear, because there are so many buildings around and so on. But see if we can tonight really, well, maybe after the ritual or in the tea break, go out and see if we can see the full moon. I'll say more about the moon perhaps later on. So that's the sort of shape of the evening. And in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Suryagupta and see what Suryagupta has to tell us about this famous Tibetan yogi called Milarepa, who had an extraordinary life. And you may be wondering, as you hear the story, what relevance his life has to our life in modern day cities, what relevance it has. Well, maybe you can ask about that if Suryagupta doesn't touch on it. Ask about it later. So for now, let's all welcome Suryagupta, who will speak to us about Milarepa.
Hi there. Hello, Nyanavacha, Hippolyte. Can you all hear me okay? Let me know. But anyway, I want to welcome you here as well. Thank you for introducing me so well, Nyanavacha, and to our theme. So yes, tonight I'm going to be talking about the fire of joy and drawing on the life story of Milarepa for our inspiration. And you've heard that he was 11th century meditator, teacher, great teacher. And many people still, read his songs, listen to his teachings today. And we're certainly inspired by him as well. So yeah, the theme of our retreat is the fire of joy. And I spoke last night a bit, for those of you who are tuning in then, to that, the fire is the fire. Well, firstly, fire is warm, it's heat, it's energy, it's also transformation. And the joy we're talking about really is the joy of liberation. It's a joy that comes from letting go of all that holds us back. So that's the fire of joy. And yeah, it's what holds us back from the lives we want to live, really. What holds us back from being really aware and compassionate, wise, and being, people that can really, make a real difference in the world and be happy doing so. It's not easy to kind of live in this world and to feel like we're having a positive effect and to feel happy at the same time. So we're going to be exploring this joy, this type of joy. So I was thinking, yes, we do want to feel fulfilled. We want our lives to feel like they're worthwhile and that we're using our time and energy in the best way possible. And we also, I think, want to feel secure and confident. And it's this sense of security that we want, that is a challenge. It's a challenge because the basis on which we feel secure often is around things like our having a great job, that can help us feel secure, relationships, people around us, the homes we live in, health, money, all those things can help this sense of security, or helps us feel stable. And at the same time, they are all subject to change. We can't control our environment that we're in. Things happen, things change without us wanting them to change. Sometimes we set about change as well, but so many things happen, as we know, with COVID-19, where we have very little control, it seems. So we're wanting security, we're wanting to, in a way, some of our confidence comes from this security, but the security we often base ourselves in is subject to change. So in a way, one way you could think about Buddhism, particularly if you're new to Buddhism, one way to think about it is how we create a path, how we cultivate security that's in the face of all this change, in the face of change. How can we develop a security that is not dependent on all those external factors? If you like, Milarepa is an exemplar of that. He exemplifies somebody who's free, somebody who's confident, deeply confident, but whose confidence and security does not come from the external, constantly changing environment. So I'm going to share a bit about his story, and as Nanavacha said, think about how might it be relevant to us, and I invite you too to think about that too. In a sense, I personally love life stories. I read lots of life stories. I like telling life stories. One of the stories I like telling and reading about is the life story of the historical Buddha who lived 2,500 years ago, so well before Milarepa came on the scene. And one of the reasons I like stories, all stories of great people, really inspirational people, and particularly the Buddha, is because I'm always learning something new every time I tell it, or every time I read a different version of it. I sort of think, okay, how is this relevant for me? What can I take away from this particular story? So I invite you to do that this evening as we're going through the Milarepa's life story. Sort of think about, well, what's it mean for me, if anything? Just have that question in mind. So yes, Milarepa, I'll just describe him first, because he, as Nanavacha said, he was this great meditator. He looked very unconventional, because he's often depicted, you might see images of him where he's sitting on a rock or sitting in front of a cave. Sometimes he's sitting in meditation posture, other times he's sitting sort of at ease, and he looks very thin. That's one thing. He's thin, and he's thin because he lives on only what he needs to survive. And particularly he lives on, they say, nettles, occasionally leeks apparently too. And some images will depict him with his skin being like a green hue. It's taken on the greenness of all the vegetables and vegetation that he eats. So he's this figure. He's thin. He's often wearing a cloth, a very thin cloth, sometimes naked. He was known to walk naked as well. So yes, and then he's sometimes got his ear, sort of hand to his ear like this. And this sort of connects to the fact that he was a singer. He was listening out, it may be for melodies, listening out. But, singers do that, don't they? Singers have a very sort of well-defined sort of tune. So ear. So he was listening out for inspiration, perhaps, as it was emerging. What he was known for as well was singing spontaneously and singing the truth to people. So I tried to imagine this for myself. I was thinking, if you met this rather strange kind of looking figure, I imagine he would have this strong presence to him, like he was nowhere else, very fully there. And he was known far and wide for, really giving people what they needed to help them with their suffering, with their lives. And I imagine sort of going up to somebody like him, going up to him and, you know, telling him some difficulty, and him just really being there, really focused on nothing else but your story, really listening. And then apparently he would sing spontaneously. And so you got to imagine that, you know, he's singing in a way some of your life back to you. You've heard, you know, you've shared your story, and he sings some of it back to you. This actually happened to me in America last year, actually, when I was there. There's this woman who's a fantastic singer, and what she does, you tell her a story and she sings bits of it back to you, and then she was inviting you to sing along with it. And it was very, very powerful experience. So Milarepa sort of sings some of your story back to you, and he's also helping you understand your experience in the context of impermanence, in the context of change, in the context of suffering, and really helping you deeply understand and see into your own story, see into the truth that hasn't been revealed to you up until that point. I imagine they say that he had this incredibly beautiful voice. So I imagine his voice and the melody would just touch you, almost bypass your intellect, that like music does. You know, when we hear a piece of music, you know, we don't have to understand it all, but it touches us somehow, and touches the parts that need to be touched. So I imagine that's what his songs, his music was doing, in a way, sharing your life back to you, so you could see into it more clearly and discover what it is you needed to do. Because also, as part of his songs, he would give very clear instructions too. Sometimes they didn't beat around the bush. It was like a mirror, holding up a mirror to you, and he would tell you, share you through song, what your next steps needed to be in order to be free. Of course, it was up to you, up to us, whether we listen to it or not, whether we take it to heart. But I imagine if it came in song, that would have been very powerful in and of itself. So that's Milarepa, the singing yogi. So he lived in Tibet around the Middle Ages, that we would say, and he grew up in a relatively good family, sort of well-to-do. They owned land. They were respected by people around them, and really, like these stories start, they often start in a sort of positive way, don't they? And but then it gets very difficult. His story, it's kind of a tough story. So there's a couple of caveats here. Firstly, we're going to be inviting you to think about what might be the relevance for you, for us practicing today in the 21st century. But also, I'd say that, yes, be prepared. It's a bit of a tough story at times. And it really gets to the toughness of this world. It really gets to the stuff of this world that can be really challenging to deal with. The later example of this guy who lives on a mountaintop, who eats nettles, who has no possessions, who really faces all the elements, who really, lives in quite harsh conditions. That was his particular way of living. And in a way, his early life, it seems extreme, and it is extreme, that way of living. We're definitely not, this is a caveat, we're definitely not saying we're recommending anything like this as a way of life. I've never lived like this, nor has Nanavacha. We both are things that help us feel comfortable. But it does, his early story does explain why that was how he chose to live in the end. And in a way, also, we can learn something from that sort of really uncompromising way of living. So yes, caveat, we're not expecting us to live like that. It's more about what does it say to us in terms of our conditions now. And yeah, it's a tough story at times, but it shows really why he ended up pursuing the life he did. And I think really importantly as well, thinking about this today, it also, for me, when I hear the challenges he went through, I remember reading his story for the first time and thinking, oh my gosh, I've never had anything, like that in terms of suffering. It made me think, that actually it explains his degree of motivation to be free. And this is really important. Our motivation, our commitment to anything that we do really makes a difference to the outcome. And Milarepa's motivation to practice, because of the suffering he'd been through, was deep, was very deep, very strong. And we'll see that in the story. A friend of mine once said to me, I was complaining to her. She was somebody that suffered a lot, and for all different reasons. And I was complaining to her one day about, you know, all the things I was going through. And she said to me, Suryagupta, the bigger the lump of clay, the bigger the Buddha. And by that, she was really saying, sometimes it's, if we've been through a lot of suffering, it's not that suffering is good. None of us want to suffer. But if understanding suffering, understanding the nature of suffering, can give us that additional motivation to practice, and therefore help us make the most of the opportunity we have to practice and learn the teachings. So this was Milarepa, somebody who had a great motivation to practice because his life was tough. So he grows up in this really well-to-do family. Everything's okay until the age of 7. And at 7, his father gets sick, and his father knows he's not going to survive. And as a good parent, he tried to do what he could to prepare for life after his death, or upon his death. And it was a patriarchal system at that point, as it continued to be for generations. So money and property couldn't be passed to the women, couldn't be passed to his wife. It went directly to Milarepa, but he was only 7 years old as well. So of course, his father wanted to secure the family fortune for them. So he got all the relatives together. He got his brothers together. He got his mother's family together, his wife's family together. And he explained that he was going to basically needed them to look after the family, to care for his family, and particularly to hold the family fortune in trust for when Milarepa became of age. So that was the system there. It didn't seem like it was overly questioned. It wouldn't have been at that point. And that's what happens for a few weeks after the father's death, but it changes very soon. These kind of customs are open to all kinds of abuses, and this one was heavily abused by his father's brother and the brother's wife. So really, quite soon on, they take control of all the resources, all the family fortune, and basically shut out all the other relatives, so no one else can get a look in anymore, or even have an influence. They shut everybody out and say, look, I'm the oldest brother, he would have charged me for this, and he carries on from there. And so they basically, you know, they basically go into servitude. It was, in a way, it's worse than servitude. It's like a form of slavery that the family now have to contend with. That they go and live with the aunt and uncle and basically have to do work for them. In fact, I'll read this bit, because he says, Milarepa says, our food was food for the dogs, our work for donkeys, forced to toil without rest. Our limbs became cracked and raw. With only poor clothing, we became pale and emaciated. Our hair, once dangling with gold and turquoise, turned ashen and thin and became infested with lice. So I can't imagine that sort of fall, if you like, that sort of, you know, they were upstanding in their community. People looked up to them. People were proud of them. Some people were envious of them. They were proud of who they were. And suddenly, Milarepa, his sister, he has a sister who's a few years younger than him, and his mother are reduced to really living in this way. And they go for all kinds of really, you know, violent treatment. I mean, that is a form of violence, to live like that. And what really seems to hurt them, obviously, it's a huge betrayal on the part of the brother and the aunt. But what also seems to really affect them is other people's reactions to this. So some people who once looked up to them as this upstanding family that they wanted to, you know, be alongside, you know, those people really want to be where the power is. So they leave them. They're no longer where the power is. They want to, you know, then they align themselves with the aunt and the uncle. So that upsets them, that hurts them. And also what hurts them deeply is those people who are really sympathetic, those people who can see the situation they're in and they care for them, but they say nothing. They do nothing, they say nothing. So really the aunt and uncle are able to carry on their actions with impunity. No, they're not held to account. People just leave them because they've now got power. They're now rich. So that's all really, really painful. And years go past, and when Milarepa turns 15, I mean, 15 seems to be like the coming of age at that point. So at that point, their fortunes change somewhat. Fortunately, the mum is left some inheritance from her parents, some land, and a little house, and that the brothers, her brothers, are able to really work the land and give her some money to live on. In effect, she's able to leave the aunt and uncle now because she has some means to live. And you know, that seems to be, you know, well, that is much, you know, that is good, that is positive. They've got a little way out. They are some way out now of that sort of abuse they were experiencing. But of course, they haven't got their inheritance back. And that really plays on the mother's mind. She wants justice. She wants to get her inheritance back. So she decides she's going to do it in the customary way. And she calls all the relatives together, you know, her family, the aunt and uncle. She has this feast for them. And at this feast, she then says, you know, Milarepa is now of age. Now is the time to give back the family's inheritance, the family fortune. But of course, years have gone by and the aunt and uncle have gotten completely used to having what they have, and they aren't letting it go. So in fact, what they do is to say, what are you talking about? It was all ours in the first place. It was, we gave it to your husband to look after, and he just gave it back to us. In fact, they say, this land, even everything you own, is still ours. And then they're even violent to her right there and then. So really terrible, despicable, really, behaviour on their part. So what should she do? I mean, she's really caught, you know, in this situation. Justice has not been served, but she's used the only real means, it seems, to get justice, and it's been thwarted. So what, you know, the other option open to her, there's probably lots of options open to her, but she can't see any other way. And she harbours this, and what she wants is revenge. I think this is you know, it's very difficult, isn't it? I mean, this is a form of oppression. This is what's going on here. This is oppression. There's not, you know, in these days we have laws, we have policies, we have different ways of trying to bring about justice. But actually, even in this day and age, there's still a lot of this kind of behaviour happening. And, you know, it really is harmful. It really harms people in lots of different ways because it looks like there's no way out. So what does she do? She basically decides to seek revenge. I guess one way out for her would have been to, you know, keep thinking about different ways she could, you know, get people to speak to them, find different, you know, creative ways to change the situation, you know, wait for time to do its thing, perhaps, and wait for another opportunity. But she's not able to even to think of those things. She's not able to mobilize any more people around her. She's just filled with revenge and filled with hatred and distress and despair. And yes, that's what she wants. She thinks that's her way out. I mean, again, you know, what she does at this point, she asks Milarepa to exact revenge on her behalf. So yes, you know, this is also interesting. But let me go back to revenge, because it does sound extreme. You know, she wants revenge. She wants them dead, really. She wants them erased. She wants them erased. It does sound extreme. It is extreme. But again, it happens in the world we're in, this kind of stuff. But even if you bring it back to closer to home to ourselves, then I was wondering, well, what do we do when, you know, we feel somebody's caused us harm? How do we resolve that for ourselves? How do we do if we're in a situation which feels very oppressive? How do we move forward with that? These are really important questions, I think, for us. And also, what is the nature of revenge? Why is it that that comes up as a potential solution? Is it a solution at all? It's quite interesting, because even though we might not think we're very vengeful, do we bear grudges? Do we get resentful? Even if it's not revengeful, do we get resentful? And then what do we do with that? Do we want people to have their just desserts? And what does that look like? So it's really, you know, from a Buddhist point of view, somebody else's suffering does not relieve our own suffering. That's a really important teaching. That doesn't mean to say people shouldn't be held accountable or there shouldn't be kind of justice, but with revenge, there's almost like a pleasure of seeing somebody else's suffering. And from a Buddhist point of view, it doesn't really give us that satisfaction. And we see that in Milarepa's story. So, the revenge that she asks him to, in fact, how it happened, I mean, this is also shows how consumed she was by her feelings, her hatred at this point, because at one point, the whole family say to Milarepa, okay, we haven't got the inheritance back, you have to get some skills. And it's basically, they're giving him the responsibility to get skilled and find a way to regain the status of the family. So he goes off with his teacher. It's kind of unconventional teacher relationship, because they end up getting drunk one day, it seems. And Milarepa really enjoyed his time with his teacher, learning whatever he's been learning, and he's singing. He's known to have a great voice already by this point. So he's going back home singing, and his mum's in the kitchen, and she's got this stove coal pot, but then she's got the ashes. It's obviously a live, you know, cooking thing, and she's got these ashes in her hand, and she's also got some kind of implement, like a wooden stick, a stirring stick, spoon in her hand as well. And she hears what sounds like her son's singing, and she can't believe it. And she goes out there and she sees it is him, and she flies into a rage and actually goes forward and throws the ash in his face, hits him over the head with her wooden stick, and says to him, how can you sing? You know, we are the most miserable people on this earth, and you're there singing. So it shows you, you know, what's happened to her, that there's no room for anything else. You know, all she can think about is, you know, what she wants, and this revenge she wants, and the hatred she's got. And it's at this point she says, you've got to exact this revenge, Milarepa. And then she says something really, again, quite tough. She says, if you do not do this for us, for me, for us, I will kill myself in front of you. He's 15 years old. It seems like he's had a hard time, but they've survived it, and he's now got the opportunity to learn skills, to meet people, to explore the world. But then his mum says this, and he loves his mum. He loves his mum, and he knows that his mum loves him, and he can see that she thinks it's the way out for them, and he does want a way out as well for her suffering, for her. So he agrees to do it. And she basically tells him to learn, you know, in a way, forget all the wonderful other things you're learning. What you need to learn is a destructive magic, destructive art of magic. So he ends up finding a couple of different teachers, and they teach him all that they know, and they conjure up. In fact, that's how I think of magic in this way. I mean, you might think, oh, there's no such thing as magic, but I think of it as conjuring up, fixing your mind on something, conjuring up something in your imagination, and then, you know, really imagining it happening in the world externally. And in a way, that's what the conjuring up is, isn't it? You know, we think of so many things in our imagination, and so many things come into being too. But there's a particular art that he's exploring and that he's shown by these teachers, and the result is that eventually he causes, through various means, the house to collapse, whereby the aunt and uncle, they're having a wedding reception for their son, And it's a very joyous occasion. And Milarepa, through the art of magic, causes the house to collapse, leaving 35 people dead. So that's the first thing that happens. And then his mum, when she tells him to exact revenge, she's very, even though she's consumed by hatred, she's very clear in what she wants, because she says, I want them gone, the aunt and uncle, but not only them, I want all their supporters gone too. So in that house, many of their supporters were there. But the aunt and uncle escape, actually. So, you know, it hasn't actually worked for them. They escape, and they're, you know, obviously beside themselves with grief. But their revenge isn't complete. She still wants more. And she basically wants the village to suffer, because they all didn't act on her behalf when she was in trouble. So the next act that Milarepa does is cause hailstorms to come and destroy the crops. So the village goes hungry. So really, they become the most unpopular people, and that's an underestimate. They become really, well, they can't stay there. Clearly, they've got to flee. The mum, interestingly enough, after the house collapse, I mean, she's even, in a way, you could say that it's really unhinged her in some ways, because she goes to the house and sees the destruction, and really, you know, she's happy, she's gloating, she's saying, see, this is what you all deserved. But of course, people, even those that were sympathetic to her at the point, previously, they can't be sympathetic now. They said, look, it did not deserve this. Look at the suffering. So she becomes deeply unpopular, and they're after her, of course. And then, of course, when the whole village crops destroyed, then they're after Milarepa, and the family gets dispersed. So this is another question that came for me. I was thinking, yeah, but even if we do, you know, we have these resentments, or we feel we want to see somebody get their just desserts, you know, how does it make us happier in any way? In a way, it didn't for Milarepa at all. In fact, their family disperses. The sister has to go one way, the mother goes another way. She has to keep lying low the whole time. And Milarepa, who is responsible for all this destruction, I mean, he knows immediately, really, that it was the wrong thing to do. He knows, he feels terrible. He's overcome with remorse, with grief. You know, he doesn't know what to do with himself at this point. How can he live with that conscience that he knows he's created suffering? Yes, he has suffered, but he's now created untold suffering for so many people. So yes, the consequences for him are very, very heavy. And in a way, he's known nothing but suffering at this point in his own life, and then in all the lives around him. And what else is there for him to do but to seek some way out, to seek some freedom from this suffering? He doesn't seem to ever identify himself. He doesn't seem to get to a point where he's like, okay, life is worthless, or I'm worthless. It doesn't seem to. He knows he's a skilled person. He knows he's capable. He's experienced that. He also knows he's a singer. He wants to sing. He wants to find joy. It's there within him. He knows that. He's experienced it in the past. Even during some difficult times, it was there. He knows that. So he never seems to completely identify with his acts. They are things that he has done that he deeply regrets, and he wishes to do better, to understand better. He wishes to free himself from the consequences of that, but also to uproot the things that caused him to act like that in the first place. And that's really key for us, I think. It's a really important message for us, that no matter what we've done in our lives, no matter how difficult our experience has been, how oppressed we've even felt by our conditions, there is a way out. That's what his story is trying to share us as well. There is a way out. There is a way we can transform our experience if we choose to. And it is a choice. It's a choice that he makes. He makes his choice to go in search of teachings that will help him to lay down this burden, lay down this karmic burden, because you know, he knows the actions he's had will keep having repercussions, keep having consequences for him. That's really, in essence, what I mean by karma, that the actions, negative actions, will keep happening. And how does he, negative consequences will keep happening because of his negative actions. So how does he free himself from that? How does he feel this free conscience again? How does he feel genuine happiness knowing that he has caused this suffering? And his story really shares the possibility that no matter what you've done in the past, no matter how life has been for you, there is always this way to transform, you know, one's experience. So I'm going to share with you, I think we're coming up to our little next step now, but I'm going to share with you after our meditative interlude and our break, how Milarepa finds his freedom. The teacher, I'm going to introduce you to the teacher that he finds, and they're very unconventional start in their relationship. So I'm going to share that with you, and we're going to also find out what happened to his mum and his sister as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Suryagupta, for leaving us on a cliffhanger. So we've got Milarepa in dire straits, and I think it would be a good time to just sort of take that in, meditate for 10-15 minutes, and see if we can just absorb something of the story so far. So if you want to set yourself up in either your meditation posture or make yourself comfortable on a chair. If you are sitting on a chair, try and have your feet on the ground, flat on the ground, and your back upright so that you're not slouched, and you can have a sense of poise in the upper body as well as a sense of being supported by the ground and by the chair. So I'll lead us in the meditation. We'll do an abbreviated practice of the metta bhavana, the development of loving kindness. But beginning by taking a few deeper breaths. And as you breathe out, having a sense of the weight of your body dropping through the seat under you, through the points of contact your body makes with the ground, into the earth beneath, falling down into the earth. It's as if when you breathe out a sigh of relief. You can let go of the weight of the body. And you can imagine that weight dropping further and further into the ground, into the earth. Rooting us to the earth beneath. And at the same time, having a sense of lift in the upper body. Perhaps imagining a thread lifting you from the crown of your head and the spine rising up, supporting the upper body, rising up in its natural curves. Allowing the face to soften. Imagining all the myriad muscles in the face, softening around the eyes, around the mouth and jaw, and the forehead becoming smooth. The eyes becoming soft. And as the face softens, imagining any areas of tension in the body also softening, the tension, the holding on, melting away into the ground. And the shoulders falling away down the sides of the body a little bit more. The muscles in the legs, in the thighs. Imagining those muscles softening, the legs becoming heavy and soft, a sense of letting go in the legs. And bringing your awareness into the belly, into the stomach and the region of the stomach. Noticing any sensations you can feel in the belly. Imagining the belly softening as you bring awareness to those sensations. And having an overall sense of your body, a sense of the space your body occupies. Sense of the energy in the body. And see if you can also bring awareness to the heart center in the center of your chest. and awareness to how you're feeling in yourself, your general mood, becoming aware of any emotions that might be present. Just an overall sense of how you are. And if you don't know how you are, that's fine too. Just noticing that. And see if you can turn towards your experience with a sense of well-wishing, with a sense of kindness, even tenderness towards yourself. Whatever's going on, however you are, meeting it with gentleness, tenderness, kindness. And a sense of wishing yourself well. And if the mind wanders, just notice that that's happened and gently come back to the body. Come back to a sense of yourself and to wishing yourself well. Wishing yourself the best from this retreat. Wishing yourself freedom from suffering. And then in our imaginations, broadening out to include all of us here meditating together, all over the world, over 300 of us right now sitting together. Let's wish each other well. Let's wish all of us well. Wish the best for us. May we be free from suffering. May we make progress on this retreat. May we find real joy. And then from there, let's expand out to include people all over the world, all beings, all people, in all different states of existence. Some people well, some people sick, some people with everything they need, others who are homeless and hungry and frightened. Many people in the world scared, feeling insecure, perhaps lonely, perhaps bereaved, and in states of grief. Wishing them all well. People just like us, who want to be happy and free from suffering. May they be happy. May they be well. May they be free from suffering. May they make progress in their lives, progress towards true freedom, true joy. Imaginatively extending the well-wishing out to all beings wherever they are. If you want to, you can extend it to those that have died, wishing them well too. And then beginning to let go of your effort. Just come back to yourself, your body, its sensations, a sense of how you are. And for a few moments, let's just sit without trying to do anything in particular. Just sitting in awareness. We are the night ocean, filled with glints of light. We are the space between the fish and the moon while we sit here together. Good. Okay, very good. So let's have a tea break where you can stretch your legs, make yourself a drink. And then after the break, I'm going to ask Suryagupta to continue with the story of Milarepa. So let's come back let's have 10 minutes. Let's come back for 8:10.
So, hi there. So we're back. Hoping you can all hear me. So yes, I'm going to continue where I left off, and just to remind you, Milarepa, our hero, about to become enlightened at some point. He's certainly in search of enlightenment. He recognizes now that he needs to free himself from suffering. He's seen from the age of 7 so much suffering. He's seen the effects of what we call in Buddhism the 3 root poisons, the 3 negative mental states. Greed, he's seen the effects of greed. He's seen the effects of hatred. He's seen the effects of ignorance, and particularly the ignorance of, well, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to do with negative emotions, not knowing how to work with, situations that are unjust. He's seen that directly. He's felt it, and he too has inflicted suffering, not knowing how else to act, not knowing how else to free himself from the challenges. So he needs a teacher, and he eventually finds a man called Marpa. He's known as Marpa the translator because he translated texts, Buddhist teachings, so that Tibetans could practice. So he's known as Marpa the translator. He finds him, and he's a gruff kind of man, and a farm owning, and he's definitely not what Milarepa necessarily expects as a teacher. But Marpa looks at Milarepa, and apparently he knows, when he sees Milarepa, he knows that Milarepa has these great qualities, he has great spiritual potential. And he knows he wants to help Milarepa, but he also knows that Milarepa is carrying around this burden, this heavy conscience from having killed all these people and inflicted so much suffering. So he knows he can't just give the teaching straight, or he knows Milarepa needs to prepare himself for this teaching, or at least Marpa sees that Milarepa needs to be prepared to receive the teachings so that they will really work. So he gives him a little test, and he says to him, go and build a house. And Milarepa's strong, he knows he's smart, he thinks that's straightforward, I can do that. And he goes and, over time, with his physical hands, builds this house. And Marpa comes and inspects it and says, yeah, great, fantastic job, great job. Now tear it down. And Milarepa's confused. What do you mean? You wanted me to build it? Yes, now you needed to tear it down. And this goes on again and again. And each time, so Milarepa knows he needs to do what his guru or his teacher requires him to do in order to receive the teachings. All he wants is the teachings. But Milarepa says yes, and Marpa says, yes, you'll get the teachings, you have to do these tasks first. And the tasks get progressively harder and harder. At one point, Marpa says, right, okay, you've proved yourself. Now I want you to build 4 great towers for each of the directions. So Milarepa says, okay, fine. And, gets his strength and get up again, his determination. And remember, his motivation for freedom is huge. So he's prepared to do all of this, because he knows what he's aiming for. He knows he's looking for liberation. So he builds these amazing towers, and probably guessed it, Marpa says again, great, tear them down. It gets to the point actually where Milarepa doesn't feel he can deal with this anymore. He really is desperate for the teachings. Marpa is not giving him the teachings, or he's giving him teachings that he doesn't recognize as teachings. And at one point he even leaves Marpa to find another teacher, and his teacher gives him some really nice Buddhist teachings, some practices, some meditations, but they have no effect on Milarepa whatsoever. He doesn't feel the benefits of them. So he eventually returns to Marpa, who again gives him another ordeal, puts him through another ordeal, and in the end he's really despairing. And it's Marpa's wife that actually interjects here, because she says to Marpa, look, okay, I think, you know, he's got the whatever teaching it is you wanted him to get, he's got that. Give him the teachings now, give him the Dharma, give him access to the three jewels, the teachings of the Buddha, the Dharma, and give him, you know, your guidance, the Sangha, give him your inspiration. So Marpa does do this. And what really follows is a very strong relationship between the two of them. I mean, it was already strong actually before that, because most people would have left at the first hurdle, but Milarepa didn't. Milarepa stuck with it until he felt he couldn't, but then he came back. So they already have a very strong connection. But what develops is a very loving relationship between the two of them. You have Milarepa always invoking the inspiration of Marpa. Whenever he meditates, whenever he's about to sing to somebody, he brings Marpa to mind. He brings Marpa's inspiration. He has such loyalty and dedication to Marpa. And in return, Marpa loves Milarepa. There comes a point in the story where Milarepa, he goes to sleep and he dreams one night of his mother, and he dreams of his sister, and he dreams that his mother is laying dead in the house, and he dreams his sister is wandering without people really caring for her, and her not being able to really care for herself. And he wakes up very distressed, very, you know, tears streaming down his face, and he goes to Marpa and tells Marpa, you know, that he needs to go and find his family. It's time. He's done a lot of work on himself by now. You know, he's freed himself from much of the challenges that he had, much of the negative weight he was carrying, and he now needs to find his family. And Marpa knows that if he can foresee this as well, that they won't meet again, that if Milarepa goes, they won't be able to meet again. And, you know, he says, you know, well, this will probably be the last time we get to be in each other's company. You know, but all things change. But he's saddened by it. And then Marpa's wife is really upset. You know, she's crying, and Marpa says, oh, why are you sad? He goes, he's like our son. He's just like our son. And she shares all of Milarepa's wonderful qualities. And I think by then they're all crying. And one thing I like about the Milarepa story is that there's a lot of emotion in the story. There's definitely no holding back. There's a lot of tears, you know, people always shedding one way or the other. So yes, Marpa's in tears, Marpa's wife's in tears, and Milarepa bids them a very sad farewell. And he does go in search of his family and finds the house and sees it in a very dilapidated state, and well, then, you know, goes into a room and sees the remains of his mother. So he's overcome with grief at this point. You know, he had foreseen it in his dream, but of course he didn't want it to be real. He didn't want that to happen, and there it is. And what it is he's very I mean, he loves his mother. That's from the beginning. That doesn't seem to have changed. And he's just really deeply sad that his mother, you know, died in that condition. His mother never found freedom of heart. His mother never was able to free herself from the challenging conditions of the past. Was never really able to embrace joy. And to embrace the precious opportunity that her life still afforded her. So he has this great regret for that and sadness around that. And he sits in meditation with, you know, her remains around him, and really at that point really vows, really commits to the deepest liberation possible, really on behalf of his mother, on behalf, you know, for really as a way to say, well, okay, I couldn't, you know, make a difference for her, but I can make a difference for many, many other people who may be in similar situations in the future. I can do that. And he really commits himself to the deepest liberation for all beings. And he brings his mother to mind as well, and really wishes, you know, that wherever her consciousness is, that, you know, she finds, you know, some semblance of a well-being and happiness whatever has happened to her. So he wishes her well as well. He eventually meets his sister too, and teaches his sister, really helps his sister come to terms with her experience, and finds a way forward, finds a more positive, creative, constructive way forward, really teaches his sister the essence of the Dharma. And the aunt, he sees the aunt as well, and, you know, he also sings to her. He sings to her, and again is like a mirror to her, really showing, you know, showing her the consequences of her deeds, but not in a way that's, well, I'm going to now tell you, you know, how terrible you were, but just the facts, just what happened, really, and really showing her the suffering that she's in as a result, and that's caused as a result, and that actually it doesn't have to be like that. He shows her a way forward too, and he acts out of compassion for her. And apparently, you know, she breaks down in tears. She recognizes, she's able to see clearly what's happened, and she too, you know, commits to change, commits to practice. So then, of course, Milarepa becomes this. He goes back into solitary retreat, and becomes, after many years, comes out and is the singing yogi. He's fully enlightened by this time, and becomes this man who wanders from place to place, mountain top to mountain, cave to cave, meets all kinds of people in all kinds of different situations, and teaches them liberation. And in a way, no one can come before Milarepa and, you know, tell them a story that's as, you know, challenging as his, that he meets many people with many challenges, but he's been there. He's understood the suffering of greed, hatred, delusion. He's understood what happens if hatred goes unchecked. He's understood the momentum that negative emotions, you know, can have, and the havoc they can wreak, and he has uprooted them, and he's able to share that with them with this song, with this spontaneous song, which gives them hope and inspiration and instruction. And that's why we still draw on Milarepa today, for all that he represents, but also his songs. I mean, they're funny. Many of them are funny. They're quite wacky, some of them, and just the example of a being, a man who's really able to just live without the concerns of the everyday, live in a way that's at one with the elements, live in a way that's at one and at ease with himself and the world, and yet able to direct and help people out of the things that get us caught up again and again. So that's why we study Milarepa, and that's why we have, that's why it's the fire of joy that we're on this retreat with. It's a theme.
Thank you very much, Suryagupta, and really good that you sort of made Milarepa's story, which is an extreme story even for medieval Tibet. You really made it relevant for us in a way that I think is really important, because I think we do need to reflect on our own suffering and what are we doing with our own pain, and also reflect on the fact that the Dharma life, if we do really want liberation, if we do want enlightenment, that we're going to have to strive. It's a heroic ideal. It's not going to just be an easy path, not necessarily. Anyway, so we've got some time now. If you've got questions, put them in the chat box, and Suryagupta and I'll try and respond. And if you don't have any questions, then Suryagupta will just carry on talking, or I'll carry on talking. One of us will just carry on talking. There's so much to say about Milarepa. We can carry on exploring. But if there are questions, or questions or even something that you're unclear about or want to hear more about, then yeah, just write them in the chat box. And Hippolyte is now joined by Guillaume. So we've got a French tech crew. They're going to read the questions out. I'll read them out so that the mic picks them up, and then Suryagupta and I'll answer them. And then we'll move into the final part of the evening, which is our full moon puja, our ritual. Okay, so have we got any questions, Hippolyte? Not yet. Not yet. Well, maybe I'll say a little bit about my sort of response to Milarepa. In many ways, he's not just a million miles away geographically. I feel that my life is a million miles away, and my temperament is a million miles away. And yet I feel very, very inspired by Milarepa. What I particularly, Suryagupta brought this out, respond to is his devotion to his teacher. His teacher, Marpa, you could say, was extremely hard on Milarepa. He didn't let him off the hook at all. He knew that Milarepa's deeds, his black arts, the fact that his deeds had led to, well, he'd committed murder, would lead to Milarepa going to a really hellish future life if he didn't reach enlightenment in this life. And karmically, Milarepa had lots of negative karma that he had to burn off, and Marpa helps him burn that off by just throwing hardship after hardship. You could say it's almost abusive, actually, what Marpa did to Milarepa. But Milarepa, even though he despaired at times, didn't seem to lose faith in his teacher. The devotion to his teacher remained constant. And then, of course, after enlightenment, he saw what Marpa had done. Marpa had given him a chance to reach enlightenment in this very lifetime when he was facing hell otherwise. Suryagupta, do you want to add any more about either that or another aspect of the story while we see if there's any questions? Oh, we have got a question, but go on, Suryagupta.
Yeah, I think in a way, I think you answered that, or you posed a sort of question there yourself, Nanavacha, about the relationship between the teacher and the guru, the disciple, and how can we make sense of the fact of the way Marpa treated Milarepa at the outset. And in a way, it's hard for us to make sense of it from where we stand today, I think. And certainly that kind of behavior would not be tolerated today.
Abuse,
neither of us are condoning it in our context today. But there they in a way it worked, you know. And I think what I get from that is that, you know, there's not a one size fits all in terms of Dharma. We have the basic, we have the Dharma teachings, we have our practices, and everyone can benefit, I think, from the practices. And we have the many core teachings, but how you apply that in your life and the life you need to live is very individual. And that's why I think, you know, we have people that are teachers to us, or we have people that are further along the spiritual path, because they know us, they know our conditioning, they get to know us, they get to know our conditioning, and they can be able to guide us and go, oh, well, this, you know, this will work for you, this might not work for you. We never give up our own responsibility, though, and I think that's really key. We also have to be checking ourselves, you know, is this teaching working for us, isn't it? I think the really interesting thing about the Milarepa here is that in the end he did get fed up with Marpa, actually, and he went off, and the teacher gave him some generic teachings, and it didn't work. So, and that really shows that we do have to personalize some of the teachings, you know, that we get, and have people that know us well and understand why, you know, help us understand why some teachings might work for us more than others.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Hippolyte, there's a question. Do you want to read it out?
Yeah, there's several questions. So
okay.
The first one, Jack, is, can you say a bit more about why Marpa made Milarepa do all these pointless tasks?
Yeah. Yeah, so Jack is asking why, can we say a little bit more about why Marpa made Milarepa do all these pointless tasks? In a way, that's the kind of $64 million question or whatever. To understand it, I'll say a bit, see if you've got more to say, Suryagupta. To understand it in context, you have to understand something about the nature of karma, at least as it's understood in Tibetan Buddhism, which is that Milarepa had, as a consequence of his heinous crimes, he'd accumulated all this negative karma, which would have caused him hellish suffering in future lives. And Marpa saw that there was a way of Milarepa burning off his negative karma, but that required him to undergo suffering and hardship. Now, as Suryagupta says, that's not a path which we in Triratna follow. You know, as an order member in Triratna, we don't sort of try and burn off people's negative karma by causing them suffering. It's tempting sometimes, but we don't. But in Tibetan Buddhism, there's that sort of faith in the law of karma. And what Marpa does is he's making Milarepa suffer. But he himself, Marpa, always feels love for Milarepa. He knows that Milarepa has got the potential to reach enlightenment. He knows that Milarepa is the disciple that he's destined to have. And he has to, at times, has to go against his own nature in order to appear cruel to Milarepa. And he really does make him suffer. The way that I think of it, because I don't necessarily take the story literally in that way, but the way I think of it is that Milarepa, having committed all these crimes, he wasn't receptive for the Dharma yet. Marpa could have given him the Dharma, and Milarepa, it wouldn't have worked. It's almost like Milarepa needed to purify himself, purify his own mind and become receptive. And in a way, what Marpa does is break down Milarepa's egotism. And he does it in the most crude way, which is build these towers, one after another, and then knock them down. He says to Milarepa sometimes, he says, "Oh, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean you to build that tower there. I must have got that wrong. I meant on the other side of the mountain. Knock it down." And then he says, "Oh, I meant a round tower, not a square tower. Knock it down." He just keeps punishing Milarepa, breaking him down. And I think there's something valuable in that. Again, it's not a practice that we deliberately undertake in Triratna. At the same time, if you approach the Dharma full of, pride and conceit, you have to work to dissolve some of that. You have to erode some of that. You have to become receptive. In Triratna, Bhante Sangharakshita's really recommended Sangha, friendship, as a way of working on our own egotism, trying to overcome our own self-centeredness. He said, look, work with others or live with others, and you'll soon find that your pride and your egotism gets eroded. So that's how I take what Marpa was doing. I don't know what you think, Suryagupta.
Yeah, no, I agree in the sense that we learn most, don't we, when we recognize that we have to learn something.
Yeah.
And we learn most when we feel that we understand the need for the teaching too.
Yeah.
And Milarepa came to Marpa really open, I think, for really wanting the teachings, but perhaps he wasn't at that point where he fully recognized, how much, or on some level there must have been some pride there, perhaps. We all have pride, actually. We all have pride. I know when I first came along, I thought, it will take me maybe 6 years to get enlightened, which is a mad sort of estimate now when I think about it. But I didn't really understand myself. I didn't really know the barriers, for me. hadn't really fully explored my conditioning and the views I had and the ways I was very defensive, and I just didn't really know myself well enough. So in a way, some of the difficulties I had early on, when I started practicing, the first period of practice was great. It was all wonderful. And then a point came where I thought, this is actually quite hard. It's actually quite hard to do this. And I don't seem to get on with, I'm doing the Metta Bhavana, which if you're new to the practice, we'll teach you that. And it's a practice of loving kindness to all beings. I thought, I'm doing the Metta Bhavana, but I actually really get annoyed with people a lot of the time. And so I began to get annoyed with myself too. And I began to realize, there's so much more to me than I realized. There's so much more to me that I need to work with, and that needs to be open to even wanting the truth. So I see it like that. I see that we all have our little mini sort of struggles in this way. Like, do we really want to change? Do we think we really need to change? Or are we really okay how we are, really?
Yeah, thank you. And although we won't hopefully have to endure, I don't know, building towers and knocking them down, I think we will have challenges, all of us, on the spiritual life. It can be a tough path. Yeah. Hippolyte, have we got any more?
Yes, we do. So linking on the theme of the previous question, Nyanadara asks, how do we purify our karma? How does that work?
Nyanadara asks that. Nyanadara, hi there. Nyanadara is asking, how do we purify our karma? How does that work? Well, I think you do it through Dharma practice. But what particularly comes to mind is service. I mean, there are other ways, of course, but serving a goal higher than yourself, serving other people. Somehow, we live, particularly, perhaps even more so than in medieval Tibet, perhaps more so than any other culture in the history of human beings. We live in a very, very individualistic time, in a time where we kind of think that happiness is found by me trying to get what I want. And normally what I want consists of material possessions and status and power and, I don't know, wealth and maybe the ideal partner. But it's external things that we try and appropriate onto ourselves. More than any other time, we tend to do that. I think to work on our karma, we've got to serve someone or an ideal, something beyond ourselves. We've got to break down our own self-centeredness. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that completely, because if we do it completely, that would be enlightenment. But I think many of us need to do that if we're going to make progress, real progress on the path. I think the danger of modern Buddhism in the West is that it becomes another thing that I can get for myself. So I can get the status, the money, the power, the job, the partner, whatever it is, the holidays, the house, the car. And guess what? I'm going to get meditation and Buddhism now and be really spiritual on top of all of that. Well, Buddhism, if we're trying to appropriate into our own sense of self, it doesn't work. Beyond a certain point, it won't work. So I think service is what comes to mind as a way of working on our karma. But in a way, all of Buddhist practice, meditation, ethics, all of that will be working on purifying our karma. Do you want to say something, Suryagupta?
Yeah, thanks, Nanavacha. So as Nanavacha said, all of Buddhist practice helps us work on our karma. Karma in the sense of releasing our consciousness from, the negative effects of actions that we might have had done in the past, because it's there. That's the first thing to recognize, though, I think, that, what we do positively has a positive effect on our minds. parts, and what we do negatively, that negative intent, will also have a negative effect on our minds and hearts, and therefore have an effect in how we operate in the world as well. So for me, in terms of the key thing that what helped me understand or relate to karma was just around, my actions in the world. Are my actions in the world having a positive effect? Am I coming from a positive intention, or are they coming from a negative one? And just trying to recognize each time that I was acting out of anger, or act out of anger or irritation or something like that, recognizing that actually I was going to suffer. I was going to suffer first, and I was going to cause some suffering down the line. And for me, really knowing that I don't want to suffer, really know that I do want to feel connected to myself and other beings, deeply connected, and feel the sense of community. That really brings me alive, and I really feel like I'm in sense of community now, and I'm working for the benefit of others. But in order to even get there, I know that I needed to kind of realize that just a very basic thing of negative actions will have negative effects, firstly on myself, and it will cause suffering for myself. And the more I was able to take that in, the more I've been able to then commit to the positive. And commit to even understanding what the positive looks like, because that's also an inquiry in itself. What does it really mean to be positive? It doesn't just mean smiling all the time and being nice. It definitely doesn't mean that. So I also had to understand that too. So I would relate to it in that way.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe we've got time for maybe one more. We might have to answer it quite briefly, but see if we've got one more.
Yeah, there's quite a few people asking whether Marpa was real and how do we take this story symbolically.
Oh, yeah. Marpa was real. Milarepa was real, as far as I know. 12th century Tibet wasn't that long ago. When you read the songs of Milarepa, you do get a sense of a consistent voice. You do get a sense of a personality. And Milarepa then had disciples who had disciples who had disciples. And in a way, Milarepa is seen as one of the founders of one of the four main schools of Tibetan Buddhism. So, he was real. At the same time, I think in Tibet, it's fair to say that there probably wasn't a distinction made between what we would call myth and legend and what we would call historical fact. The medieval Tibetan mind wouldn't have distinguished between those. So in the stories of Milarepa, you'll hear some more stories in the evenings to come. There are all sorts of magical things that happen and miracles that happen. Milarepa can fly off in the air, he can multiply his body, he can disappear, he can turn into other shapes, all of these things. And whether that's literally true or not doesn't matter so much as whether it speaks to us in some way. So as I say, the Tibetans wouldn't have distinguished between myth and historical fact. They wouldn't have thought in that way. But I think that if you do want to think in terms of history, Milarepa was probably a real person. Yeah. Look, we're probably going to have to wrap up on the questions now, because I'd like to allow a little bit of time for our concluding ritual. So I'm sorry if we didn't answer your questions. Pop them in the Slack channels somewhere, and hopefully one of us will have a chance to answer them at some point. But before we move on to the ritual, once again, I would like to just say a little bit about the vision of what we're trying to do. I was saying earlier, just a few moments ago, and Suryagupta was echoing that, I was talking about this sort of self-centeredness and how it prevents us from making progress in the Dharma, and how we tend to, very often in the West, see the Dharma as one more thing that I can add on into my life to make my life better. You could say it's sort of like a consumerist mentality. Meditation and Buddhism and all the teachings the wonderful teachings that lead to enlightenment can be seen as something that I can have and make mine and enhance me. And in Triratna, we really are trying to create a community. I believe that we are creating a community which doesn't work on that consumerist mentality. It doesn't work on the normal buy and have appropriation that the rest of the world often works on. What we're trying to do is create a community of people who are practicing together, helping each other grow and move towards true freedom, true liberation, true enlightenment, true joy. So it's that I think that all of us on this retreat, even if it's your first retreat, you're now sort of part of this community. And if you want to contribute in a way to keeping this community going, one way you can do that is to give money. If we weren't in lockdown, if we weren't in this weird time, I'd also say, look, come and help out at your local Buddhist center. If you're living near a Buddhist center, give your time, give other support. You can't sort of do that very easily at the moment. If you haven't got money, then in a way, just that's fine too. Just participate as fully as you can in the practice of the Dharma. That too will have an effect on people around you. That too has a strengthening effect on the community. But for obvious reasons, we really do need money. All the Buddhist centres, Sheffield, Dublin, Cambridge, Brixton, the London Buddhist Centre, all of us need money at a time like this to keep the facilities that we're trying to maintain going, to keep the teachings active, to keep the community going until such time as we might be able to, be able to return to some sort of normality. I don't know what that will look like. So as Garavavati was saying yesterday, we've suggested that if you can, you give £100 or whatever that is in euros if you're in Dublin, you give £100. But in a way, we're saying that, but not in that consumerist way. It's not a charge. It's a suggestion for a gift, for a donation. We do need to keep that spirit of generosity alive. Otherwise, it stops being a dharmic community and it becomes another product that we're selling. And we really don't want to do that. So I'm going to invite you to give the £100 is just a guideline, but give whatever you want to give or what you feel you can give. And if it's more, then of course the money will be really well used, and that'd be great. I know some of you gave last night as soon as Garavavati had asked. Some of you gave, and I feel very moved by that, given that you don't really, some of you know what we're offering. You know, it really is not a exchange, not a commercial exchange. If you give, particularly if you give now. So if you, Ipalit's going to put the link into the chat box, and if you press that link, you'll be asked to give either to the Dublin Centre, to the Cambridge Centre, to the Sheffield Centre, to the Brixton Centre, or to the London Buddhist Centre. And just to say in advance, thank you very, very much for your generosity. I hope that we can raise at least £20,000 over this week, if not more. Okay, very good. So let's get back to our full moon ritual. So we're going to do a threefold puja, what's called a threefold puja. That means it's got 3 verses to it. And as we did last night, I'll read a line, and then Ipalit and Guillaume will respond by reciting the line back. And at home, you know, even though you're on mute, so you won't be able to hear other people, I'm inviting you to just join in and recite that line back. Recite the puja in call and response. And At the end of the 3 verses, I'll lead us in the Shakyamuni mantra, as I did last night, the mantra of the Buddha. And if you want to, you can make an offering to your shrine, in a way opening up, becoming receptive to the ideal that's represented by the shrine. And then at the end of the puja, like we did last night, we'll sit in silence for a moment or two, and then I'll ring a bell. Ippolit and Guillaume will extinguish the candles behind me, and that's the cue for you to leave and hopefully have a good night's sleep, and hopefully you'll be able to be bright and early, waking up for the 7 a.m. meditation tomorrow. And of course, before the puja, we're going to hear some of the words of Milarepa again. So I'll read the same reading that we had last night. We'll read that again and again. This is Milarepa directly through one of his songs, exhorting us to practice in a no-nonsense, full-hearted way. So settling yourself into a comfortable posture. I am a yogi who wanders the countryside, a beggar who travels alone, a pauper who's got nothing. I left behind the land of my birth, turned my back on my own fine house, and gave up my fertile fields. I stayed in isolated mountain retreats, practiced in rock caves surrounded by snow, and found food as birds do. That's how it's been up to now. There's no telling the day of my death, but I have a purpose before I die. That's the story of me, the yogi. Now I'll give you some advice. Trying to control the events of this life, trying and trying to be so clever, always planning to manipulate your world, involved in repetitive social relations. In the midst of these preparations for the future, you arrive unaware at your final years. Not realizing your brow is knit with wrinkles, not knowing your hair is turned white, not seeing the skin of your eyes sink down, not admitting the sag of your mouth and nose, even while chased by the envoys of death, you still sing and rejoice in pleasure. Not knowing if life will last till morning, you still make plans for tomorrow's future. Not knowing where rebirth will occur, you still maintain a complacent contentment. Now's the time to get ready for death. That's my sincere advice to you. If its import strikes you, start your practice. The Threefold Pooja. Opening reverence. We reverence the Buddha,
We reverence the Buddha,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the shower of the way.
the shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma,
We reverence the Dharma,
the teaching of the Buddha,
the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha,
We reverence the Sangha,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciple,
that inspires and guides.
that inspires and guides.
Reverence to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha
We reverence the Buddha
and aspire to follow him.
and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born
The Buddha was born
as we are born.
as we are born.
What the Buddha overcame,
What the Buddha overcame,
we too can overcome.
we too can overcome.
What the Buddha attained,
What the Buddha attained,
we too can attain.
we too can attain.
We reverence the Dharma
We reverence the Dharma
and aspire to follow it
and aspire to follow it
with body, speech, and mind
with body, speech, and mind
until the end.
until the end.
The truth in all its aspects,
The truth in all its aspects,
the path in all its stages.
the path in all its stages.
We aspire to study,
We aspire to study,
practice,
practice,
realize.
realize.
We reverence the Sangha
We reverence the Sangha
and aspire to follow it,
and aspire to follow it.
the fellowship of those
The fellowship of those
who tread the way.
who tread the way.
As one by one,
As one by one,
we make our own commitment,
we make our own commitments,
an ever-widening circle.
an ever-widening circle.
The Sangha grows.
The Sangha grows.
Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer flowers,
we offer flowers.
flowers that today
Flowers that today
are fresh and sweetly blooming,
are fresh and sweetly blooming.
flowers that tomorrow
Flowers that tomorrow
are faded and fallen.
are faded and full.
Our bodies too, like flowers,
Our bodies too, like flowers,
will pass away.
will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer candles
we offer candles.
to him who is the light.
To him who is the light,
We offer light
we offer light.
from his greater lamp.
From his greater lamp,
A lesser lamp we light within us,
a lesser lamp will light within us.
the lamp of Bodhi,
The lamp of Bodhi,
shining within our hearts.
shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer incense,
we offer incense.
incense whose fragrance
Incense whose fragrance
pervades the air,
pervades the air.
the fragrance of the perfect life,
The fragrance of the perfect life,
sweeter than incense,
sweeter than incense,
spreads in all directions
spreads in all directions
throughout the world.
throughout the world.
Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha. 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 Shakyamuni Swaha. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni 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 Shakyamuni Swaha.